Hello YouTube and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor and we're going to be going over the Crossguard stance. So this is going to be my Crossguard stance guide. And so you may recognize the Crossguard as the larger two-handed lightsaber form. It's the last one that you unlock in the game, and it is based off of, at least in canon, Kylo Ren's lightsaber. So the upside of this one is it's very cool, does lots of damage, all that sort of stuff. The downside is it is based on Kylo Ren, so you gotta really weigh the pros and the cons before you decide on whether or not you're going to use this one. So just some fast facts about this one, sort of a surface level one. Like I said, you get it near the end of the game, or I shouldn't say that, but it's the latest in the game. You get it at the end of your first trip to the Shattered Moon, and you get it from killing a bounty hunter. You'll pick up an emitter from him, and suddenly you'll have the ability to have a Crossguard lightsaber, which, whatever. You can decide whether or not that makes a whole lot of narrative sense. I don't really care. But that's where you get it. So, other fast facts about this one, it has the highest damage hits. So, out of all of the lightsaber stances, if you hit an enemy once with any single one of them, none of them are going to do as much damage as the Crossguard stance, so this one by far does the most. Other than that, the melee attacks have the longest range, so when you're just swinging with the lightsaber, this one can hit enemies from the farthest away, which makes sense given the fact that it has the longest blade. Another fun thing about it, one of the things I always tell people when they say they haven't tried it out yet or they just don't like how slow it is that it's got one of the coolest skills in the game, and it's the specific blaster bolt reflection, which we'll get to when we go through the skills, but with this one it actually allows you to not just reflect the bolt they shot, but to turn it into a charged shot, which makes it incredibly deadly. It does have three cons that I've noted. The biggest one is what we've already talked about. It's slow moving, so you have a long wind-up with all of your strikes. It's a big window for you to get hit in, so that is a downside of this one for sure. Another one is that I would say it's between the Crossguard stance and the blaster stance for which one has the biggest skill gap, you know, the biggest learning curve, the most difficult to get truly proficient with. It's one of them, so the Crossguard stance is certainly up there. It does take quite a bit more practice, training, and getting comfortable with it to actually become what I would call proficient with it in the game. And like I highlighted at the beginning, another con, it's based on Kylo Ren, so not everybody wants to be the bleeding heart edgelord himself from the worst 3 Star Wars movies that have ever been made. I mean, I've never seen Solo, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, if you really like Kylo Ren, then it's great news. If you're like most people and you don't, then it's bad news. And just a note about the style itself. If you've played any of the Dark Souls games, or any Souls-like games in general, it is actually a lot like using the giant swords in Dark Souls. So it's got kind of the same strengths, weaknesses. You gotta really heavily rely on parrying, timing, all that sort of stuff. So if you're used to that, then you shouldn't have any problem with this. If you're not, then you're gonna have to get good. So that's all the fast facts, surface level information about the Crossguard stance. Let's go over the skill tree now. So you can see that there are 8 skills for the Crossguard stance. I don't really have any that I definitely recommend getting, and any that I definitely recommend not getting. If you're going to specialize in the Crossguard stance, I recommend getting them all because it's going to be your best shot at being very proficient. But in any case, the first one you're going to unlock is the Rending Strike. And with this one, it says hold X to perform a single high damage swing with a long windup. So this one increases the already incredibly long windup to do this big sweeping overhead strike. Does a lot more damage than the regular attack, but like I said, it has a relatively long animation and windup time, so it's easy to get interrupted from. So again, timing is going to be everything. The next perk over to the left is Impact, and this one says press Y while airborne to slam into the ground, causing a shockwave. This one is directional, it's not area of effect, so when you do this, it shoots out in a line in front of you. It can be pretty effective. It's useful mostly against lower level enemies, stormtroopers, droids, stuff like that, but I use it quite a bit just because I got so used to jumping strength attacks in this game, and so you do get used to it if you use it long enough. After that, we have Greater Impact. All it does is increases the range of your impact, so it's just an upgrade of impact. Over to the right, you can see we've got Greater Cleaving Swing, which reduces the focus attack charge up time for Rending Strike, so it's useful for just speeding up the form a little bit. And at the top, we have Reaching Cleave, which increases the range of your cleaving swing, so both of those just affect the move you already have, but make them more effective. Then going up the center, we have Sundering Swipe, which says hold LB and press X to perform a wide sweeping lightsaber attack. This is pretty dang useful because the problem with the slow movement of the Crossguard stance is that sometimes you'll find yourself getting surrounded by lower level enemies, and they'll be able to just beat you into submission because you can never actually land any strikes because they constantly get interrupted. This one is your crowd control to either kill or at least get them them out of your way because it has a tremendous amount of stagger and it can sweep through and kill multiple enemies in one hit. So it's useful to have, definitely useful to remember when you start getting, you know, kind of banged against the wall. After Sundering Swipe, we have Charged Reflection. This is the skill I was talking about. It's so epic. So with this one, if you parry the bolt right before it hits you, like you always want to do for the best accuracy and killing ability, instead of sending just back the bolt itself, it will send it back as a charged bolt that will hit the target and usually kill the target if it's a lower level target, or at least do a lot of damage, but it also does area of effect damage to any other enemies that are nearby. So I use this one a lot when I use the Crossguard stance because it is so effective. So Charged Reflection is not only a great skill to get for this one, but in my opinion it's probably the one that makes this stance the most fun to use. And finally we have Rolling Thunder, which is your thrown lightsaber ability with the Crossguard stance. So basically you hold LB and then press Y to throw the lightsaber in a line. It does the most damage for any thrown lightsaber attack. It can take out, as you just saw there, multiple opponents because it'll go through as many as are within its range. Now mind you, it's limited usefulness because how often do enemies line up in a nice straight line for you and stay there? And since it's overhand and it's rolling instead of spinning sideways, it has a rather narrow window for actually what it hits. When it works, it's very useful, but like I said, it's situational and so it doesn't work all the time. But that's it for the skills for the Crossguard stance. As far as your stances go in general, like I always say, you don't just get one, you get two, and so the smart thing to do is to pick a complementary stance to make sure that you fill in for the weaknesses of your stance. The first one is the double-bladed saber, which is what we have equipped here. The double-bladed saber is pretty close to being a polar opposite to the Crossguard stance. Instead of slow attacks, you've got extremely fast attacks. Instead of having the highest single hit damage like the Crossguard stance does, you have the lowest single hit damage, but it's made up for by the fact that in using the double-bladed stance, you constantly have kind of a shield around you because the attack movement interrupts enemies as they're trying to hit you. So I find the double-bladed saber is the perfect backup stance for the Crossguard one. And the Crossguard stance is excellent against single opponents, bosses, stuff like that. And the double-bladed saber is really not. It's probably the worst against larger bosses and single opponents. But it is excellent against groups, whereas the Crossguard saber typically is not. So like I said, they fill in for each other's weaknesses rather well and make a pretty good combo. The other stance that I can recommend going with is the blaster stance. And it's mostly just because it's got a good synergy with the Crossguard stance. The blaster stance is probably the worst as far as saber combat goes, and just the least reliable in that regard. The blaster stance is obviously much better at longer range because you have a blaster that you can shoot, and its saber portion of the stance is very finesse accurate, whereas the Crossguard stance is definitely more accurately described as brute force. So I find that they complement each other's weaknesses rather well. As far as perks to go with this one, there's actually a couple here. So I recommend starting it off with Resilience. This one just increases your block meter. I recommend this one because there aren't a whole lot of specific ones that are really, really great for the Crossguard stance, so we kind of just want to go for general ones that help boost you as much as possible. I find with the Crossguard stance, unless your timing is extremely good and you're very, very good at parrying, you unfortunately take a lot of damage. So it's glass cannon, and you want to make sure it's as good as possible, and just in case you miss your parry, you don't want to run out of block stamina, so the Resilience perk is a good one to choose. The Centered perk says enemies in a small area are staggered when Cal is healing. Cal can take one hit and not be interrupted. This one, again, helps with the fact that, unfortunately, you do take a lot of hits with the Crossguard stance, unless, like I said, you've gotten to the skill level where you're just really, really good. So this one will help you by making it a little easier to get healed. You don't get interrupted, so no matter what, even if you get hit, you'll still do your healing, and when you hit it, it sends out this little shockwave that kind of staggers enemies for a second or two, which just makes it much easier to get healed. So I find Centered is useful for this. Then I recommend Shatter. So this one gives you another increase to... This one gives you an increase to damage this time, so you're going to be more effective against your enemy's block meter. So for enemies that are going to try blocking you, this one will make your attacks deplete a lot more of their block meter. So I find this one useful because of the slow swing speed. You want it to be as effective as possible, and if you can deplete your enemy's block meter and even possibly stagger them, it makes it a lot easier to win with the Crossguard stance, so that's why Shatter makes it onto this list. Then of course we have Fortitude, which is one that I use a lot. So this stance is already a glass cannon. This one makes it a little bit more of a glass cannon, but it gives you like a 50% increase to saber damage for, I don't know, it's hard to measure, but I would say 20 or less % increase to incoming damage. So unfortunately, this one does increase the damage that you take, and so like I said, it makes the stance even more glass cannon than it normally is, but it also makes you deal a lot more damage. So if you get good with this stance and you get good at parrying so you're making sure you're not taking damage, it just makes it that much more effective because it really increases your damage output. And then finally for our last one, because we have one slot left if we use those first 4, I want to use Steadfast just because it allows you to not be interrupted. You absorb 1 hit without being interrupted while sprinting. So if you're going to utilize the Crossguard stance with any sprinting attacks, which you can do, this one will prevent you from being interrupted by that. And like I said, since you have a spot left, it's better to fill it, even if it's something you rarely ever use. And so I find Steadfast works pretty well for that. But that's all for today. That's all for the Crossguard stance. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining, but we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you liked this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.